What's up, guys? I'm Nick Whalen for RotoWire. I'm going to talk about players I am panicking about as we enter week 4 of the fantasy football season. Number 1, we're going to a wide receiver, Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. I had my skepticisms on Pittman coming into the year. Honestly, it's been significantly worse than I ever expected. He's seeing a very high target share, almost 30% in that Colts offense, which on the surface seems good, but the Colts are a low volume passing team right now. You have to wonder, what are the quality of those targets? The answer, not very high quality so far. He's caught at least 3 passes in each of the first 3 games, but he's yet to put up more than 36 yards in a game. He doesn't have a single play that's gone for more than 20 yards. And the Colts, for their part, as much as they struggled, they're generating a handful of big plays per game. They're just not ending up in the hands of Michael Pittman. This is a guy, in order to be the receiver that we thought he could be in fantasy, he absolutely needs volume. He needs the type of volume, targets-wise, receptions-wise, that he had last season with Gardner Minshew. At this time last year, Pittman already had 25 catches, and that was mostly with Anthony Richardson as his quarterback. We've seen a departure from that so far this season. More than anything, Pittman absolutely needs Anthony Richardson to get settled in. I think this is more of a Richardson problem than it is a Pittman problem. Richardson entering week 4 is dead last in the NFL in completion percentage. He's under 50% on the year. He's thrown a league high 6 picks. No one else has even thrown 5 so far. He's ahead of only Bryce Young in terms of QB rating. He's 25th in total pass attempts. Because of Richardson's struggles, the Colts offense overall is really struggling, as you might expect. No team has run fewer plays so far this season. They're dead last in terms of time of possession, dead last in terms of time and plays per drive. They're only converting about 30% of their third downs on the year. That's near the bottom of the league. All that needs to come around for Michael Pittman to live up to his ADP, and I'm not sure it's changing anytime soon. I mean, entering week 4, Pittman's the wide receiver 70 in PPR leagues. Tough matchup this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think that's the defense to get things turned around against. Maybe as the season goes along, we start to see more from Anthony Richardson. But if I'm a Michael Pittman manager, I am very, very concerned. I'm trying to get off of him if I can. I know that's a difficult proposition right now, but I'm not really even comfortable starting Michael Pittman in week 4 against the Steelers. And by the way, his teammate A.D. Mitchell took him late in a lot of drafts. He's in borderline drop territory at this point. Only played 6 snaps last week with Josh Downs back in the mix for the Colts. All right, next up, we're going to pair 2 players together here because I think they're in similar situations. 2 running backs, DeAndre Swift and Rachaad White. Both of them are kind of layups in terms of this conversation. I will say, off the bat, I'm more confident that DeAndre Swift is fully cooked relative to Rachaad White. I think there's still some value for Rachaad White in PPR leagues. The Bucs offense will probably look better than it has the last 2 weeks, but both of these teams are openly talking about getting other running backs involved. That is not a good thing when we're going into week 4 of the season. Swift and White are the 2 worst backs in the NFL in terms of yards per carry. Neither of these 2 plays behind a good offensive line. The Bears especially is just so bad. Swift has only 5 carries that have gone for 5 or more yards this season. Meanwhile, he has 11 carries that have gone for 0 or negative yardage. You think of the speed option last week at the goal line against the Colts. I think that was kind of the magnum opus for this Bears offense. He's not really being given a chance by the offensive line. I get that, but DeAndre Swift is also not helping himself. I think we're going to see a lot more Khalil Herbert. We're going to see a lot more Roschon Johnson over these next couple of weeks for the Bears. He's simply not startable at this point. And if he couldn't get it going against the Colts of all teams, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of hope here. I will say the Bears' upcoming schedule, though, it is relatively friendly, but you probably have at least 1 or 2 other backs on your roster right now who are a better option than DeAndre Swift. Meanwhile, for the Bucs, I think this is the week that we really start to see more Bucky Irving. He's been by far the better back so far. He's been way more effective on a per carry basis. White is still winning the snaps battle pretty handedly, and that could continue. But when he's on the field, he's not seeing the ball very often, whereas Bucky Irving, when he's on the field, he tends to get the ball. He touched the ball in about 60% of his snaps in week 3. White had the big week 1 in terms of PPR, but since then, he has only 6 catches for 23 yards. If I have either of these running backs, and I pray to God that you don't have both, I'm very concerned going forward. All right, next up, we got 2 tight ends that I'm very worried about. Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. 2 names that we probably didn't think we would be discussing in this light 3 weeks into the season, but we got to talk tight ends, right? I mean, there are plenty of names that we could bring up in this context, but considering acquisition cost, I'm most concerned about these 2, Kelce and Andrews. Kelce was often a 3rd round pick. Andrews probably a 4th or a 5th rounder. With Kelce, it's a combination of age, lack of targets, defense is still keying on him, even this late in his career. It's not a snaps issue. It's not a volume of routes run issue. Those are right where they should be. And we heard Patrick Mahomes, mention this last week. He said, we're trying to run plays for Travis Kelce, but teams are still bracketing him. They're still sending multiple guys his way. So I think there is still a respect factor for Travis Kelce that we do need to consider. And maybe that changes as the year goes along, but Kelce's earned only 12 targets through 3 games. He has only 1 reception that's gone for more than 20 yards. Through 3 games last year, Kelce had 17 catches on 26 targets for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. This season, he ranks 13th among tight ends in team target share at about 14%. Last year, he ranked 5th at the position with a target share north of 20%. Now, the emergence of Rashee Rice as a big-time wide receiver 1, I think that hurts Kelce. They also have Xavier Worthy in the mix as a new weapon. The Chiefs just don't need to rely on Travis Kelce as much as in years past. And look, they're 3-0 heading into week 4. So what are we complaining about? I do think Kelce gets more involved as the season goes along. He really can't be any less involved. I think that's one way to look at it. But like every player on this list, he's already dug himself a hole 3 weeks into the year. And it's going to be really, really tough for him to end up returning round 3 value. Meanwhile, for Mark Andrews, major concerns here. And it's a little bit different than Travis Kelce. You know, for the most part, a lot of people were willing to write off that week 1 game against the Chiefs, kind of a fluke where Kansas City was really keying on Mark Andrews. They were willing to give up targets to Isaiah Likely. And I get that. I subscribe to that. And Andrews did go for 4 catches, 51 yards in week 2 against the Raiders. But week 3, played only 20 snaps, ran only 6 routes against the Cowboys, and was targeted only 1 time by Lamar Jackson. Now, we do need to keep in mind that was a game in which Lamar only attempted 15 passes, and they were gashing the Cowboys on the ground. So that's part of the equation. But that's kind of how the Ravens want to operate this season. A lot of Lamar, a lot of Derrick Henry, winning that way whenever they can. At some point, the passing game is going to have to pick up in terms of volume. But so far, this has been a very, very low volume attack. In terms of target share, Lamar's looking Andrews' way on only 9% of his attempts. That ranks 31st in the NFL among tight ends. Like the Chiefs, the Ravens are going to continue to find ways to get Andrews involved. He's one of their best players. It's not going to be like this the entire year. But unlike the Chiefs, they have another viable tight end option in Isaiah Likely. He's still going to see snaps. He's still going to see targets. Even if Andrews gets more involved, the big thing we have to stress with Andrews is I think we have to lower his ceiling considerably the rest of the way. Before we get to the next names on our list, please take a moment to give this video a like if you're enjoying it. And of course, please subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our content through the NFL season. Next up, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you've watched my videos, if you've listened to me on pods or on the radio, I'm a Jaguars fan. I'm not proud to admit it. We've hit rock bottom. But I still like Etienne, the player, a lot. I wasn't jumping off of Etienne, 1 or 2 weeks into the year. Everybody wants to get Tank Bigsby more involved. But we have to be realistic here. He's being dragged down by what's devolved into a terrible offense in Jacksonville. In terms of catching the ball, Etienne's still seeing a decent volume of targets, but these are very low-quality targets. He's basically getting tackled as soon as he catches the ball every time. And the real concern for me is the snap volume and the carry volume for Etienne. And a lot of that has been game flow so far. Jags are playing from behind. They're not possessing the ball. They're not converting third downs. That's going to hurt any running back. But he's seeing about a 70% snap share this season. He was often into the mid to high 80s for much of last season, especially early in the year. And part of that is Tank Bigsby working his way into the mix. And, any reasonable team wants to have multiple options at running back. You don't want to be running Travis Etienne into the ground. But if this is not going to be an efficient offense, if he's only going to be giving you, 3.5 yards per carry, you're going to need the volume for Travis Etienne to make that up. And I don't know if that's coming around as long as Tank Bigsby is healthy. Last season, when he had the great year, 4th in the NFL in carries, he was way down in terms of success rate. Etienne, when you look at some of the advanced numbers, wasn't even all that great of a pure running back, but it was all about volume. And if that volume's not there, he's going to have a very difficult time justifying that 2nd round price tag. Unless the Jags can get this offense turned around in general, which is pretty unlikely, in my opinion. I don't see them salvaging them, or I don't see them salvaging this season. Etienne is going to be a good running back who's a victim of a bad offense. He's going to have a really tough time earning back that ADP. Through 3 weeks, Travis Etienne is your RB22 in PPR leagues. The last player I want to highlight here, Jaylen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. And this one feels like another layup. And obviously Waddle is tied directly to the absence of Tua Tagovailoa, who will remain out until at least week 8. And who knows? I think there's a real chance that he could miss more time or even sit out the rest of the season altogether. I think anything is on the table right now for Tua and the Dolphins. Either way, we know Waddle sees a massive drop-off in production without Tua. He's averaging about 4 catches for 50 yards and no touchdowns in his last 7 games without Tua. And honestly, that's better than I would have guessed. I mean, 50 yards a game, you kind of take that given the situation. But who knows who's going to be quarterbacking the Dolphins for the next several games? It could be Skylar Thompson, who looked terrible against the Seahawks last week before getting knocked out. Tim Boyle, he came in, didn't really do anything. He's certainly not moving the needle. I think we probably see Tyler Huntley at some point, which is interesting for this offense, to see how Mike McDaniel can get him loose, but probably not a tangible change in terms of Waddle's fantasy upside. Obviously, Waddle, like anyone on this list, is a very difficult player to try to offload at this point. You're going to have to take a huge loss if you do trade him. I don't even know if he's startable in the short term. You really just have to hope for those 1 or 2 big play opportunities each week, and those were not there whatsoever against a really good Seattle secondary in week 3. Overall, though, Miami's offense is really struggling, and we did see some signs of that even in week 1 against Jacksonville and week 2 against Buffalo before Tua went out. They've only made 8 trips to the red zone so far this season. They've only scored a touchdown on 2 of those 8. They've only scored, in general, a touchdown or a field goal on 7 of 33 offensive drives this season. Hard to see that getting a whole lot better with Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley until Tua is back. I'm very concerned about Waddle. I'm concerned about Tyreek Hill as well. I do feel better about him at least being startable with Tua out, but I can't say the same thing for Jaylen Waddle.